with data. So I'm a
Okay.
medical physicist and operational researcher by academic
Mhm.
background. And then I started working in the insurance industry, corporate life, right? And then I was in my own business for a little while. I didn't even think about startups at that time. This was like 2013. I was building a company for myself and a couple of partners. And then I went back to working in the consulting industry. And that's when AI really started to blossom. And we can come back to that a bit later. But as I moved through this corporate landscape again, I kept looking to the side and seeing all these innovative small companies popping up here and there. And still being in my corporate track, I thought, we're not able to do these new things, right? We think about them, we have some ideas, but they are not going to happen in this company, but they're happening out there. So when I left corporate life,
Mhm.
then I started working or serving basically pro bono work mostly as an advisor to accelerators like Antler Norway, like Bird Incubator in Croatia. I worked with Techstars in Stockholm and a few others. And that's when I really got into the AI and startup landscape and learned a lot. So I think I've been mentoring some 400 startups over these last few years. And it's really interesting work. So I'm more on the startup scene now than I'm in the corporate landscape, but I have kind of a foothold in both camps.
Awesome. That's great to hear. I also come from corporate background, but I kind of shut the corporate out 8 years ago completely. I worked mostly on innovation, value proposition design, and branding for large organizations like Nestle's, Coca-Cola's, and all. But very interesting point you made. How is the AI context different in startup versus corporate, or the technology generally different? Like, how are the two spaces perceived in these two different spaces,
But
startup versus
like on a very simplistic level, in
Mhm.
a corporate landscape, you need to respect the core business
Mhm.
because that's where the money is. And then you can, of course, grow the core business and add
Mhm.
new technologies and new solutions and new services and new products to your core to expand it.
Mhm.
But it's really, really hard to start looking into completely different stuff, like really
Mhm.
exploring the new things outside your core business. It's just, in most cases, almost not even possible
Mhm.
because you have a company and you have a profit or loss reporting responsibility and you need to operate the core business. And simply because of that impossible resource allocation, it's really, really hard to let innovative new ideas completely on the side
Mhm.
grow within the corporate. So that's where you see more of these corporate venture type of approaches where you let the innovative ideas operate more as a startup, still under the corporate umbrella, but you leave them alone, basically.
Mhm.
And that's simply put a startup just under the protection of a corporate, but it's still a startup.
Very interesting point. You completely nailed it there. Because I think in corporate, the delta, the change potential is very low, as you're saying, due to historical corporates. Always, when they are budgeting, they say, okay, what were the last year results? So this last year is always a benchmark in terms of you need to improve X%, sometimes 2% or 20%, whatever. But last year is a major anchor, which kind of fixes your mind in the background, in the retroactive perspective. But startups from the get-go have to be the large delta, like change agents. So if they are not change agents, they'll not get funded. Really interesting points over there. Let's jump a little bit into AI itself and talk about how AI is evolving in the current landscape and what are some of the significant trends shaping its development, if we may go on that side.
Right. So um, I've been working in the AI landscape for forever. And also without actually knowing about it. Because when I did my first 2 master's degrees, actually, in maths and physics, we talked about applied mathematics. We talked about forecasting, optimization. And I worked with a lot of analytical tools. We were doing optimization in the insurance industry, definitely, right? But we didn't really talk about machine learning. And then when I started working in the consulting industry, say like 2015, 2016, that's when the AI hype, the latest, or like the previous AI hype, hit the market. And that's when the general market started realizing, oh, we can actually use maths and statistics on these data for something useful. And we confuse ourselves by calling it artificial intelligence, which means it sounds a bit like magic, but it's not. And then we started really talking about how businesses can reap value from using maths and statistics on large amounts of data. Basically machine learning and a bit of robotics, but that's not AI, but still the market confused it a bit. And then November last year, OpenAI launched ChatGPT. And then suddenly, I wouldn't say the entire world because that's not true, but a large part of the world suddenly had AI here, right? Everybody was on ChatGPT, 100 million users within a few days, weeks. And then suddenly everybody, not everybody around the globe, but let's just say everybody for now, had an opinion about AI. And then we as humans, we have since Homo sapiens was born about 200 years ago, 200,000 years ago. Let's add the other 1,000, the 3 zeros. 200,000 years ago. Whenever there's something we don't understand, we dedicate it to some kind of divine force, right? In previous ages, we sacrifice a goat or something like that. Now, when there's something we don't understand, well, in this case, it's singularity. And the problem with large language models, such as GPT, and then ChatGPT is like the surface, the interface that we users typically see, is that we don't really understand that maths can be applied to languages, because the languages, they're so personal. We express ourselves through what we say and what we write, what we paint, what we photograph, so images. It feels personal. And most people don't understand that this is basically logic, and that we can most definitely apply statistics to predict what is the next word in the sentence, what is the next paragraph. So simply because people don't really understand this, they're scared. People got really, really afraid. So in the current market, I see a lot of hype and hysteria that fogs the landscape completely for a lot of leaders, a lot of people. And we have this hype around what it can be used for. And then we have this hysteria and fear around what is going to happen because we don't actually really understand the limitations. So right now, I'm rather busy as a speaker simply because a lot of leaders struggle to navigate in this really complex and foggy landscape of hype and hysteria. But really, what I keep coming back to every time is that 15 years ago, we talked about big data. Worked in the insurance industry. We invested a lot of money in warehouse projects and big data initiatives. Then, for the last about decade, we talked about digital transformation. So work processes that used to be analog have now become digital, right? In most businesses, which means we have the data, we have the processes and the systems. Now we can apply mathematics and statistics to make sense of these data. Machine learning is the most common set of methods, and then we call it artificial intelligence.
Very, very interesting points. A lot of interesting points, starting with the divine and singularity and the goat. I don't know what can people sacrifice. Maybe they can sacrifice a LinkedIn profile of theirs. I don't know. You could just go ballistic with a comment, and then there goes your LinkedIn credibility. But anyway, very interesting points over there. And I think the way you have branched it is really, really interesting, because you're saying that there is this hype, okay, which we see a lot in the VC circle. Like everybody, I also coach hundreds of startups every year, so every startup now has an AI slide with absolutely, in many cases, no clue on why they put it there, but they say that this is coming. Okay, so
Yeah,
AI is coming, so this
yeah,
is
yeah,
coming
yeah.
as well. But then you're absolutely right that there is also the hysteria, and that could probably be because hype is controlled by organizations developing technologies and who have the tools to kind of leverage the technology and move forward. And hysteria side is generally the user side, which you said they got hit by chat gpt at this level, like
Hmm.
a Pokemon Go coming in,
Yeah,
Pokemon
yeah, yeah.
AI
I said,
coming
oh,
right in your
welcome.
face, and you say, oh shit, this is AI at this stage, what do
Yeah.
I do with it?
Hmm.
And that's probably our previous conditioning is a lot based on those movies which are like, I'll be back. So
Hmm.
the Terminator movies and all that. So that's the previous conditioning of the mind. And suddenly you
Yeah.
are saying, okay, that was the Terminator movie I've watched last night. And oops, what is this?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay. Very interesting points over here. Um, but let's see. What are some of the key challenges or opportunities do you see in this hype and hysteria, as you see, as you
Okay,
are
so
saying?
let's start with the opportunity space,
Okay.
right? The positive side.
Mhm.
And I have been talking about the use of data for more than 2 decades now in different companies, and I truly believe in the use of data. Now, the discipline of operational research, as I mentioned, as part of my background, is really about applying mathematical modeling to
Mhm.
data for some kind of optimization purpose. And that's really, in many instances, what we do with machine learning as well,
Mhm.
right? Uh, Now, if we look back to Second World War, which might seem very long time ago for a lot of people, but it's not that long ago, the the Brits were actually using mathematics to optimize their logistics. And it was a significant part of how the British military services were set up. And that's also where the discipline of operational research started and then has kept on building until now. And as I said, is about applying mathematics to data for some kind of optimization purpose. And this
Mhm.
optimization purpose is still really, really important for our society. Now, again, we confuse ourselves a little bit in the AI space by now thinking that AI means generative AI. To some extent, yes, generative AI is a part of it, but let's go 2 steps back and just accept that we have different types of data. We have the tabular data, so the structured data in all types of rows and columns,
Mhm.
data of any kind. And then we have frequency models, which could be voice or could be anything, things occurring at different time intervals, say in industry, for example. Then we have texts,
Mhm.
and then we have images. And optimization of work processes can benefit from applying some kind of logic to all these types of data. And say the insurance industry or the bank industry or telcos, they have been using maths on large amounts of data for a very long time. Say for automizing loan processes
Mhm.
or calculating the risk price of an insurance. They've
Mhm.
been doing that for decades. Actually, they did it by pen and paper like 200 years ago. And in industry, we see so many use cases for optimization. Let's do shipping, for example. If we
Mhm.
can somehow apply maths, call it machine learning, to optimize the use of fuel on large vessels,
Mhm.
that would have a significant environmental impact.
Mhm.
In green energy transition, how to optimize the grid networks or how we can balance the use of electricity in data centers, or in electrical cars, even just to make a semi-autonomous or an autonomous car operate, it needs a lot of maths and statistics and optimization and logic. And I mean, if we start digging into industries, say healthcare, medicine, medical research. I come from medical technologies or medical imaging technologies, and I think that's a prime example. So when I was a student, I used to work as a what was called a photo assistant. I was working in the radiation department. So we were doing x-rays. And every time they did an x-ray, I was carrying these old Kodak cassettes, the yellow ones, remember? I carried them to the dark room, developed the film, replaced the film, and took the photo back to the radiologist. And then I gave the cassette back to the radiographer. And now we can use AI to do a lot of the interpretation of these images. And hey, there's no dark room in the radiation or the X-ray department anymore, right? It's all digital. Yeah, so I mean, whichever industry you look at, there are so many opportunities for applying machine learning, meaning AI, for optimization, automation, and also to do new things that we couldn't previously do. But having said that, I just thought about it this morning that 12 years ago, when I worked in the insurance industry, I remember telling my boss that, hey, we could use sentiment analysis on incoming calls. If you just record those calls and we converted voice to text, we can use sentiment analysis on those recordings to analyze what is happening in the dialogue. I remember my boss saying, no. The Labor Association is not going to accept that because that's going to interfere with the labor agreements with our employees, right? I was like, no, that's a no-go. And now that's kind of an obvious use case. We were then, like, this is again 12 years ago, thinking about how can we use analytical tools, maybe even machine learning, to interpret images of windshields damages, right? To automate at least parts of the claims process. Yeah, we started doing it then. And we were like reasonably happy with the results. And now I'm pretty sure they're doing it all over. So, and then that was about using structured data, a bit of images. We started touching upon text, but really the paradigm shift on text came end of last year with ChatGPT. When the market and I would say the experts in AI globally were a bit surprised by how far OpenAI had actually been able to come with GPT-4, then 3 and then 4. And now we see this development across all these foundation models. But then generative AI is really just the next level of AI because we've been using machine learning to classify, interpret, predict. And now we're even a bit better, so we can actually also create, generate. That's where generative AI comes into the picture. So it's not like magic suddenly landed on the planet. It's just a development of our capabilities.
Very interesting points, and I have half a page filled with the points that you're making. So I'll try to summarize for our community here. But first of all, you pointed out to some very interesting opportunities on one side where you're saying optimization and automation as well as doing new things. So those are the three broad canvases where AI can help. You have also, so recurrently in the last 20 minutes or so, we have been saying that AI has been around in some form or shape, mathematics, machine learning. So there is a history which was probably not known, and that probably is linked when you launch a large language model, and this is consumer facing at this level, that suddenly public becomes aware of AI and has no context on whether AI had traditionally been used in discriminant multivariate regression. That was a previous version of AI in risk profile assessment. So it was already there assessing their credit scores. So
Yes.
nobody knows. So maybe
Yeah.
we still think that, oh, that's a decision somebody personally made on my credit file. No, it was computer driven, heuristic models and all. But great points over there in terms of how the AI is progressing. And as you said, that with the GPT 3, 4, it has really gotten very fast. So when a technology goes fast, how do you regulate? Do you regulate or not?
Mhm.
What do you achieve from regulation? And a sub point of that is also, there's also been a lot of debate. For example, threads application being launched in region X and then EU being not there. So we can also bring a little bit of EU context, because we are very strong on consumer rights, GDPR, and how consumer data and our rights to our facial recognition data and all those things. So
Yeah,
regulation, if we can touch that point a little bit.
absolutely. So when you start collecting a lot of data
Hmm.
about an individual, basically we are creating digital twins of us as individuals. A whole lot of them, actually. Many twins. Um, we also start making ourselves vulnerable for attacks on that twin, which means attacks on us as individuals.
Hmm.
And that's why we do need regulation. The trouble with regulating the AI space is that it has not been done before anywhere. This is a completely new domain,
Okay.
which means that regulators around the globe are taking very different approaches. They're
Hmm.
looking at each other and thinking, okay, so how is this going to pan out? Because I think what we can most definitely expect is
Hmm.
that there will be regulation,
Okay.
and the first sets of regulation will cause friction. They will definitely not be perfect. We will like rip our hair off and say, this doesn't work. Right, yes. Let's just be prepared for that. That will
Hmm.
happen. But we do need regulation, and we have to do it now, because we can't just let AI expand and any player in the market can be allowed to do whatever they want.
Okay.
That's really, really dangerous. And even if I may have sounded really positive in the beginning, and I'm taking down the hype and hysteria,
Hmm.
uh, I am also very explicit in my fears around AI. My
Yeah.
fear is not singularity. My fear is that we as humans are going to make a complete mess out of it. And humans are not inherently good. We humans are definitely not perfect. We make a lot of mess. We are mean. We are selfish. We create wars. Even in 2023, there are wars going on around the world. If
Hmm.
we know it's not a good thing, but we still do it, right? We cheat and we lie and we steal and we just look to social media. We're not being nice to each other. And the fact that we have AI is just another weapon, and we're going to make a mess out of it. That's my fear. And that's
Hmm.
also the main reason why we need to regulate, because we need to set some fences around these technologies and say they are really good if we manage to keep them within these fences.
Hmm.
And if we manage to, within our societies, to set some boundaries for how to use these technologies and how to respect each other in doing that. So the core foundation for the European regulation is to protect the rights of the individual,
Hmm.
as we have defined as one of the fundamental human rights within the European Union. And other parts of the world have similar approaches. It is about protecting the rights of the individual. It is also about creating a set of regulations that enables business to flow across the borders of the national states within the region, in particular within Europe, right? As we have many different national states within the European Union.
Hmm.
And the European Union has an approach to AI through the AI Act, where they take a risk-based approach. They're not saying this is allowed. They're saying these are the things that we will not allow. And so it's a 4-category approach, where the highest category is what's going to be prohibited. And then it's the high risk category. And within high risk, there are very many use cases that will have a significant implication for our lives, such as access to jobs, recruitment, access to education, access to healthcare and social benefits, access to financing and credit, access to personal insurances, and a few other use cases, such as use of AI within law enforcement. And then we have a category which is medium risk. And basically in this category, we find those use cases that are about generative AI, for example, or chatbots, where basically the providers will be required to label the solution, stating that this is created by an algorithm, or you are now talking with a bot, not with a human. And then it's the low risk category, say spam filters that don't really have any implications for us as humans. A lot of large companies, the tech companies in particular, are negative towards this regulation, or at least they are very critical, if they're not completely negative. Of course, this is because they will be liable for a lot of the compliance around, in particular, the high risk category. And this is where we will see a lot of friction. Yes, I'm like, okay, yeah, that will happen. So let's just prepare, that will happen. But we really, really do need it, because we already now see a lot of cases in media. Just have a look at LinkedIn and media outlets, and we see examples of use cases that are not really good. Like a couple of years ago, the Dutch government had to resign because of a use case that wasn't even necessarily AI per definition, but was about using algorithms and flags in a system to define categories of benefit receivers that they thought had a high risk of fraud. So, and why is that a problem? Well, so an example I typically use is body mass index. Has nothing to do with technology, right? But we understand, we all know that using body mass index calculations on an individual level is not really good. We know it works for a large population to say something about the health of the population. But we know that on an individual level, it's not correct, because we have different bone structures, we have different muscle mass, right? And so using our body mass index number on me as an individual is not really good. We know that. We accept that.
Okay.
It's the same thing with AI, because we have large sets of data about a population. And based on that large set of data, we start using that to make decisions on individual levels.
Got it.
And when those decisions have a negative impact, potentially, on the individual's life, that's where we get into trouble. And that's where this high-risk category in the regulation will have its most important role, in my eyes.
Very interesting points. Again, a lot of information here. But let's you talked about high, medium, and low risks. One of the risks in let's say we talked a little while ago about self-driving cars and role of AI over there. Our laws are still structured generally that there needs to be a human accountability for something going wrong. But going right, everybody is happy, nobody even looks at it, so everybody just gives the credits and move on. But when something goes wrong, when somebody dies based on some decision, or gets discriminated from a job based on some decision, that's where the real question comes in, like, who is responsible? And that who, I don't know, we might need a different pronoun or something to refer going forward. But how do you assign risk? Like, how is risk and accountability going to work going forward in AI? I think that is one major question when AI is taking these optimization, automation, and creation, three areas that you talked about. Second thing that I kind of which you mentioned again was consumers or individuals' right to know. Okay, and that's where, so for the right to know to work, there has to be full disclosure, and we see that in food packaging, let's say. So a quick parallel to this would be that food ingredients and in EU and all that is very well labeled, and you can kind of make out, okay, if I eat this, I'll become I'll go high or low on sugar or something. So, but then the risk over there is that what level of disclosure is actually happening when we have these corporate black boxes? Will they actually disclose? Because the advantage to move ahead in market is always if you can protect and undisclose your innovation.
It's about money, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how should we solve this? Well, we are just starting this discussion on accountability, humans versus machines. I mean, we have only barely started. This is going to be a huge discussion in the coming years. And I think that we will spend at least the next couple of years trying to align the humans with the AI and the machines. And now we're all in this hype and hysteria fog, and we need to get it down and understand, okay, so what is real, what's pragmatic, what's actually happening, how are we going to work with the technology, and how will the technology help us? How can we navigate in this landscape? Say, how can we use generative AI in education? Big question.
Yes.
Not solved. So we will need a bit of time to figure out. The problem is that the technology keeps on developing while we need the time to actually discuss. And of course, that's a bit tricky. We just need to do our best to do that. Now, you touched upon this explainability issue, like ingredients in food, and how do we do that in the AI space? Now, a huge challenge we're getting ourselves into here is that most people don't understand. I'm being a bit mean here, but a lot of people don't even understand how, like, a general average mean is calculated statistically. Like,
Exactly.
Right? And when people don't even understand basic statistics, how are you going to explain how algorithms on large amounts of data are used to predict something for the individual? Like, my sister has been working in the restaurant business for her entire life. She's at the beginning of her 60s. She has a computer. She does have a smartphone. She's using her internet bank and her email account, but that's about it. So when she reads about AI in media, to her, it sounds a bit like magic. She does understand that it's not, but it does sound a bit like magic. So if you're going to explain to her how these algorithms work, we need to take a completely different approach to transparency and explanation than we need to do to, say, a data scientist, right? So this discussion around explainability needs a first question: for whom? And if we don't define for whom, we can't have a useful discussion about explainability. Now, of course, sorry.
Absolutely hit the nail on head. Like, this is really the crux of the discussion, like explainability. And I think in internet space or technology space, we have failed even before AI. We have failed on consent cookies. We have failed on term and condition because human mind cannot process this. It can process a data point. It can process 2 data points. But when you throw 5 pages of privacy text, you how do you read? So people just say, okay, click yes. So I don't know. There's also a risk, even if it is well explained, that people will just move past it and make a wrong choice.
Yeah.
Like we usually do, like I am doing when I'm signing up to a new app. I'll just say, who has time to read it? Accept all and just move. But you don't know the consequences. Yeah.
Yes. And we are going to see so many cases around phishing and scamming and abuse of personal data. in the years to come. So it will come.
Okay, very interesting. Let's move to in the last few minutes, let's talk a little bit on startup side, because you said you meet a lot of startups as well. I meet startups in my ecosystem as well. And generally there is a hype, not hysteria. So on startup side, there's a lot of hype because we
Yeah.
see these news like we were seeing just when crypto happened and the NFTs happened. So everybody was coming in and saying, can I have an tokenization strategy in my deck? And we would start arguing like, how does it even relate? Like, how can you actually do all this and turn your business? How should startups see AI going forward? Is it a case that founders need, who are at early stage, for example, they need to reassess their ideas and build AI in some way ground up? Should they just proceed with whatever they're doing? How should startups take AI coming its way? Let's
AI
go there.
is
Yeah.
only a toolbox.
Hmm.
So if you're building your startup on the color of the toolbox, I don't think you're going to succeed. What you really do need to keep focusing on is which problem are you solving and who is going to be willing to pay for having that problem solved. Now, in this AI landscape, that also enables or means that you need to think 3 steps ahead. So which problems are going to appear and emerge, which new problems will we have in society? And those might definitely have both blockchain and AI components in them. Say, for example, blockchain in keeping track of your personal data. But still, keep your eyes focused on which problems are you solving and who is going to pay for having that solved. If you can't answer that, but you only have an idea about using some fancy tech, you're not going to succeed. My personal opinion, sorry.
Mm. Okay, so we have, hi Scott, thank you for putting the question. While I agree with hype and hysteria argument around AI, isn't this really part of a bigger conversation about the reasons, use, and failures of new technology? Crypto, blockchain, selling data, Cambridge Analytics, all are all case use examples that create an aggregate sense that technology is not being released responsibly without consideration of long-term consequences or impact on the individual.
Yes. If you look at what happened in the metaverse market, like 2.5 years ago, the projections from the large tech consulting companies or consulting companies, they were like on like hundreds of billions US dollar projections for 2030 in the metaverse. Now this year we haven't heard them. Oh, they just swapped metaverse with GPT, right? Or generative AI, to be more specific, or general. Sorry. So there's this trend in the market, or maybe we should even call it a culture, that we should hype up everything new that comes around and put huge numbers on it and go sell. And then you look at it a year later and you think, oh, well, maybe quite not that much hype, but let's be a bit more pragmatic about it. And we saw that on crypto, we saw that on metaverse, and it's happening now on generative AI. And I'm thinking, like, we didn't learn anything from metaverse. Now we're doing it again. We need to be a bit more pragmatic. Yes, generative AI opened up a completely new paradigm for how to use AI and what to use AI for, and the problems that comes with it, including the abuse of personal data and the responsibility and the regulation, accountability, and the physical sustainability issues and the use of power and all that. Yes, but still, we need to be a bit more pragmatic. Let's calm down the hype. I saw, like a few days ago, just as an example, there was a lawsuit against Sotheby's from traditional art investor. But he had bought Bored Ape NFTs from Sotheby's about 1.5 years ago, when the hype was sizzling hot around Bored Apes, right? And now the value of these Bored Ape NFTs is about 10% of what he bought them for a year and a half ago. So he's taking Sotheby's to court for deception.
Mm.
And I'm not going to comment on the legal aspects of that.
Mm-hmm.
But there is some interesting reflection there around which considerations do you make as an investor in tech, right? It's allowed to be opportunistic. Feel free, go ahead, but you can't come back and say, oh, you deceived me, because you really do need to understand what are the underlying risks of these new technologies. And you should be well aware that there is a hype. But I do believe that there are great opportunities for investments in blockchain, in AI, in IoT, but it all needs to be as part of a solution to a problem. And that's where the focus should be, on solving a problem, not applying some fancy tech.
Very interesting point. And I think yesterday there's been a lot of talk around regulation of the VC space itself. I think part of the problem or part of the way we handle technology is part how VC landscape is structured and the general startup ecosystems are built. And generally, very quick risks are taken. And there's kind of a rat race happening very quickly. So, and you kind of learn because human brain needs to process some data. So you really don't know in the first 4 quarters or 6 quarters what you really did. And then you suddenly, when your first kind of batch of startups starts reaching its next round level, it's where they start putting up their metrics. Okay, now we need to move from seed to series A. This is what we achieved. Oh shit, this is not so good so far. That's where you start getting these signals of early stage if things are good, are working. But very interesting points over there. And I think this is a very, very interesting discussion. I would not want to conclude it, but we need to move ahead. But Elin, thank you so much for taking the time out today. And you'll be joining us again on next Friday. But in that panel, I think it'll be very interesting because we have AI Sweden joining us and Norwegian Authority of AI also joining us, and venture capitalists also joining us. So then we will go into the point of technology funding and how hypes are built. So a big thanks to you for today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.